This podcast is sponsored by Teens and Youth in Leadership, TYIL Africa, an organization that is committed to raising generations of young leaders across Africa. Our programs include leadership education, leadership fellowship, research training, webinars, and conferences. Stay informed of our programs by following us on LinkedIn at TYIL and at TYIL Africa on Instagram.
Hello, my name is Israel Idari. I'm a social scientist and a pragmatist. As a social scientist, my research is focused on understanding how youth develop leadership to make social change within their communities and immediate environment. I'd like to invite you to this podcast where I interview and have conversations with scholars and practitioners on their perspective on leadership, followership, and social change. I hope you truly learn from this podcast. Have fun. Today, I have with me Dr. Toye Sobande. Dr. Sobande is a leadership coach, management consultant, lawyer, author, and public speaker. He is the CEO and president of the Stevens Leadership Consultancy, LLC, a strategic management consulting firm offering services to businesses and leaders. He holds a doctorate of strategic leadership from Regent University at Virginia Beach in the United States. He is known for his writing and speaking about the relational dynamics of leadership and followership, succession management systems, and organizational health and cultural engagement. And he is also known for his weekly publications on national dailies and prominent newspaper publications. I'm so excited to have you, Dr. Toye Sobande.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're meeting from Dallas, so how is the weather like?
Beautiful sunny weather. Sometimes the weather smiles at us, sometimes the weather frowns at us, but we just understand that everything is to the glory of God.
Yeah.
But it's been a beautiful season so far.
Sounds good. All right, so today I really want to learn from you about, followership, a very huge concept that is really underspoken about and, underrepresented. But my focus today will be on followership in Africa and Nigeria. So in your perception, what is the state of followership in Africa?
First off, in Africa, followership and people's awareness of it is practically non-existent. It is looked upon from a derogatory perspective. Derogatory in the sense that when you even look at the word follower, from the word followership, if you go down to our African roots, we are very religious. And our religiosity reflects in how we view life. For example, for those who are Christians who go to church, when they pray, you will hear them quote part of the scriptures that says, "You shall be the head and not the tail." You see it in the songs, in the worship song. When they are singing, they'll say, "I'll be the first to be blessed by God. You will be number two. I will be number one. You will be number one." Everybody will be contending, using praise and worship. And to them, it's fun. That shows you our mental orientation, that nobody wants to be a follower because a follower is considered derogatory. We have equally seen it in commercials or on TV adverts that says we lead while others follow. So our mental framework in Africa about followership is not something that is palatable. It's not something people want to reckon with. It's not even something anybody wants to place themselves in. I've seen situations where in my growing up years, when we had friends and we all moved together, we do things together. I've seen one of my friends where the mom told him, "Oh, do you want to be a follower in your life? How can you be following that? But the boy is always leading and you're always following." And all that. And that thing just stayed. Like, we're just little kids. But that's the culture in which we grew up in. Everyone talks about leadership in Africa, but no one talks about followership. But yet, leadership without followership is like a dance without a partner. It stumbles and it collapses. So in Africa, we've glamorized leadership so much that we have unintentionally created a culture of spectators, of critics, and passive followers. And whereas what we need is sustainable development that depends not just on who leads, but on how people follow.
Wow. That's very impressive. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's go down to when you're growing in Nigeria and how you perceived, leadership and followership. Did you ever imagine talking about followership? Did you ever imagine followership as something that people should pay attention to?
Interestingly, I first understood the concept of leadership and followership from a conversation in our home, in my family, with my
Mm,
dad. I grew up seeing my dad as a community leader, knowing him as a community leader. I see people come to our house, engage in conversations, they hold meetings. And because I have older siblings who are way much older than myself, I was pretty much exposed to the conversation early enough. My dad had a huge library. He was an avid reader. He had a huge library of books. My siblings were avid readers as well. So we came across conversations around not just modeling leadership, but follow. Let me give you an example. Unlike many typical African homes, children are to be seen, not to be heard. That was not the case in our own home. We could engage with our dad, we could engage with our parents, we could respectfully disagree, and they take time to enlighten us as to why they have the same position. And as I'm speaking to you now, many examples are running through my head of how my dad modeled that.
mm,
So it was a culture shock for me when I began to experience life outside of my family, where I saw that people were shut down. People did not have opinions. People did not have a say. But in my home, in my family, I had a say. I had an opinion. We were consulted. You could walk up to your dad and have a conversation. Whether he agrees with you or not is a different matter. But we had a very healthy conversation. And I think that conversation also further enhances the quality of relationships we built, and that was modeled in such a way that when I got into the society, I knew how to defer to people and I knew how to engage in a way that is very respectful.
mm,
So my grown up years, with the fact that my oldest sibling is 12 years older than me, the next one is 10 years, the next one is 8 years. My immediate older brother is 6 years older than me.
mm.
So you can imagine how young I was in the midst of all of these big guys. And their friends became my friends. So I grew up faster than my age. I grew up faster than my age in the sense that I engage with their wisdom. I engage with their knowledge. I engage with their exposure. So I became really exposed to critical issues that borders on leadership. For example, I was in primary school when I read books by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, particularly his autobiography, Awo. I remember when Awo died and was being buried in 1987. As a young boy, I sat in front of the TV watching his burial because it was a national burial. It was on TV. So I was exposed to books that shaped my orientation about the leadership framework in our culture. I read books like Why We Struck. I read books like Because I Was Involved. I read books about the Nigerian coup. My mom used to make me read. I started reading newspapers as early as elementary school. I think I was in third grade or so when I was reading, newspapers. So I had an insight into the conversations both in my home, outside my home, and in the society. I recall that Chief Obafemi Awolowo's first son, late first son, Segun Awolowo, was the first to graduate as Nigeria's international lawyer, as an international lawyer from Nigeria. There were other lawyers. It wasn't the first lawyer, but his father was a lawyer. But it was the first to qualify with international law as his degree. So that day, I said, I also want to graduate and become an international lawyer. I want to graduate international law. It was several years later that I looked back when I was in England, where I did my master's in England. I looked back and I realized that was a fulfilled dream because I studied international law and international commercial law. And when I was studying international commercial law in England, I had the privilege of visiting several countries in Europe. I was with the World Trade Organization. I was with Intellectual Property Organization. I visited quite a number of those things. Now, those were the things that shaped me, my growing up years, the environment, the culture that my family built, the vision my dad built. It shaped my childhood. It shaped my perspective. In those days, my mom would make me mention the names of all the leaders in Nigeria. I could tell you the number of governors. That we didn't have as many states as we have now. I could tell it was about 12 states or so. I could tell you the names of the governors, the names of the commissioners. I could tell you the names of the ministers, their portfolios. Now, they were not academic exercises alone. They were about current affairs. But in engaging academically with current affairs and with all of this information, it began to shape my orientation, shape my perspective of what followership is really about.
Wow, thank you so much for that good explanation. Something I took from what you have said so far is that readers become better followers. Now,
Yes.
in growing up in Africa, myself, we grew up hearing this phrase that readers are leaders.
Yes.
Right now, having a change in paradigm, I think readers are actually also good and effective followers. I have another question to ask with regards to, African ideologies and also culture. I know many people believe that Africa has a deep culture of respect. How do you think that this culture of respect has impacted in a way our followership perception? Now, I know that even though Africa has a deep culture of respect, we also have bad followership record.
Yes.
According to statistics, according to what is out there. So how do you think that, the culture of respect has either impacted how people perceive followership, how people practice followership, and how people actually prioritize followership?
Thank you for that question. You see, it's a misappropriation of the word and the context in which the word is applicable that statistics or that position is based on. For example, it's not alien to us alone in Africa. Europe has something like that. Here, it's also present in the US. It's also present in the Middle East. For example, if you look into the scriptures, you will see that the culture of the day in the Bible is similar to the culture that we have in terms of respect and authority. So that when Jesus wanted to wash the feet of his followers, Peter refused because he knew that there was a cultural implication to Jesus's attempt at washing their feet. Because according to Mediterranean culture, the master of the house is never the one responsible for washing of the feet. There was a theological framework behind that. Why? Because of the environment they lived in. When you have a special guest that visits you, your choicest or the chief servant of the house is the one who goes to wash up. It's not compulsory you wash the feet of anybody that visits you, but that visitor has to be a high-profile visitor. And they get the person who is the chief servant of the house to do the job. It's a way of honoring the person that is visiting them. It's a way of showing regard and respect. So that was what was the framework in the mind of Peter when he rejected the idea of Jesus washing his feet. Why? It borders on respect. It borders on honor. If you also go back to the conversations in the life story of Job, when his friends were talking about his circumstances and the things that were going wrong, the youngest one of them, when he finally responded, he said, I thought that white hair will speak for wisdom. I thought age will advocate for wisdom. He said, but I'm disappointed. Now, he said, I kept quiet because I was just the youngest. Now, that shows you the same thing in that culture. In the Israel of that day is also in us. So it is purely human nature. It is not peculiar to Africa. And why do I say that? The misappropriation in Africa is that it is used as a tool for manipulation and subjugation. My respecting you does not mean I cannot disagree with you. Peter, that rejected Jesus from washing his feet, the same Peter rebuked Jesus. Now, mind you, Peter is older than Jesus in the Bible, but yet he called him master. The Bible said he took Jesus aside and rebuked him sharply. I said, no, when Jesus was talking about his death, would that mean he disrespected Jesus? Would that mean he dishonored him? So in our culture, I can honor you. I can respect you without making you lose face when I disagree with you. My disagreeing with you does not mean I should attack your self-esteem, does not mean I should bring you to the point of shame. So I can disagree with my leader. Do it honorably, do it respectfully without them losing face. So when people actually think that because we are very respectful, because we obey authority, it has made us to be subjugated in such a way that we cannot confront issues. We can. And there are proverbs in our culture that substantiates that. You understand what I'm saying? So it is when people want to be mischievous, that's when they misrepresent the authenticity behind the word respect. Honor. You understand what I'm trying to say? So that's exactly what became a perversion in our culture. Yes, we have a deep-seated difference to authority, starting from our family structures, down to our religious life, down to our politics. But if the environment is toxic and is narcissistic, that is when we see people use respect, honor as a tool to subjugate others. It is in a healthy organizational culture, healthy family system, healthy political system that the mindset of honoring leaders thrives. But when the culture is toxic, when the culture is, narcissistic, that's when you now have the extreme. And that's why we now say, okay, in Africa, because people who are in leadership position, if you want to correct a leader, I used to remember that when I was young, they say something to us in Yoruba language that, meaning you don't say to an elder that an elder is lying. Now, what they are trying to say is that they don't want to give the young child a license to put the elder to shame. Naming and shaming. I can name an issue and not disrespect. So that means you have to separate the person from the issue. Address the issue without disgracing the person. So I can call out my governor for bad governance. Do it respectfully. Do it objectively by focusing on the issues that I'm calling it out for. Why not attacking his person? That is followership. That is the authentic followership that I know. Followership is not barraging leaders, abusing them, bringing them down, and say, oh, because of this respect thing, I'm not going to, I will respect you. Why is there a need for respect? God created every human being with dignity. He did not say good human beings. He did not say bad human beings. When the Bible says respect all men, he didn't say respect good men and don't respect bad men. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says it clearly. It said honor all men, respect all men, honor all men. I wrote an article when President Buhari died on that, about the lamentations of leadership. I'm saying this concept of saying we don't speak ill of the dead. Okay, but the Bible says we should honor all men. He didn't say whether they were good men or bad men. So I can respect a leader, whether he's a good leader or he's a bad leader, without shaming him, but yet stay critically on the objective. And what is the objective? The objective is about critical thinking, about initiative, about engagement. As simple as that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that in terms of giving feedback to people who are in higher authority and even, going against some of their rulings that you don't feel is morally and ethically right. Arachalev, I'm sure you're very familiar with also the book, The Intelligent Disobedience, how you can intelligently disobey people's authorities and rules that do not seem morally right. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, my next question, I know that there's a concept called the romance of leadership, and that is something that I believe we do in Africa, where people give so much value to leadership as against followership. How do you think this romance of leadership has disrupted growth and development in Africa?
Thank you for that question. The how is because for us, we individualize leadership as a tool to benefit our selfish interest. And therefore, the glamour that comes with it, the perks of the office, the resources, the financial resources, has made leadership something that people idolize. And therefore, we have the romance. Why? We see leaders as saviors. We see leaders as messiahs. We see leaders as miracle workers. We see leaders as people responsible for solving all problems. And the romance of leadership feeds on this framework, this mental framework. And that mental framework is what also feeds the blame culture, the blame game culture, that if the nation struggles, it is always the fault of leaders. Followers rarely examine their own role in that. That's the bad side of that romanticizing of leadership. I remember that the Harvard scholar, James Mendy, coined the term romance of leadership to describe the psychological bias where followers overestimate the power of leaders and underestimate their own agency. They underestimate their own agency. And that means there's a psychological framework to it. It's a mental orientation that weakens people to feel helpless. So that's what moves people to the state of learned helplessness. You hear people say, we don't even know where we are going in this country. We don't know where they're taking us. They're just doing what they like. We don't know where. They feel helpless. They don't see their own role. And their role in paying taxes, obeying the laws, being good citizens, voting for the right candidate, participating in the political framework that selects good quality leaders, not accepting bribes, not saying because it's my brother that is in power, then whatever my brother does, I should support him, whether good or bad. That is exactly why that affects. So that mindset distracts citizens from accountability. It distracts from accountability. It disempowers them from grassroots changes. So we take it up rather than take it down. So for example, communities wait for government to clean the drainage. As simple as that. Government will they say, look at it, and they say they are government. They've not come to clean our drainage. They've not come to do this. They wait for government to fix roads instead of organizing themselves to solve their own local issues. Same in organizations. Employees complain about managers, but rarely step up with solutions. They stall on innovation. When we showcase the example of the NSAS movement, for example, in Nigeria, where young people shifted from spectatorship to active followership, demanding accountability, demanding participation in civic engagement. That's a clear indication of the fact that people are coming to terms with this. They're gradually leaving the concept of, and we are seeing it, social media is a god with that. It's a gradual process, but it's not going to work unless we develop a followership education framework.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable, and that's why the NSAS project and the people who anchored it failed largely, because they did not understand what they were dealing with was systemic, and it's a mental orientation. It's systemic. So I always tell people, do you find yourself blaming leadership for everything, or are you actively shaping the small corner of the system that you influence as an individual?
Thank you so much. When you mentioned followership education, I giggled. And that was because, that's going to be my final question. How do you think Africa can develop a followership education framework across board?
So, first of all, in our curricula, we have to develop an educational system that teach obey the leader. Collaborate with the leader, not just obey the leader. So we need to turn the thing on its head, because our current system says obey the leader, but not collaborate with the leader. We need to change it. If you look into our political space and the arguments on Twitter about successive government from the same political party, everything is about obeying the leader. But that framework has to change. For the followership education to be strong in Africa, to be well established, it must be from the angle of collaborating with the leader. How can followers collaborate with leaders? For example, in religious spaces, we emphasize loyalty to spiritual leaders, but we rarely teach the theology of responsible followership to God. And how do you know that? When people leave the anointing service, go to the car park of a church. See how people behave when they are driving out after the anointing service, especially when there's a queue, when there's traffic. See how they'll be moving. See what happens. That tells you that the message, the service, the message is not transformational enough. It's about idol worship of who the set man is. So one of the things I would recommend in terms of strategic change is that we need to integrate civic education that goes beyond patriotism to teach collaborative citizenship. I used to do that when I was in primary school. We had a course called a subject called civic education. I don't know whether it exists anymore. I learned a lot from those courses that when you enter into a public bus and an elderly person comes in as a child, you stand up, let the elder sit down. But look at the argument on Twitter some years ago, where Professor Wole Soyinka entered into a plane and he was sitting down mistakenly on another seat, and another young man who bought the seat came. Look at what people said. Let's even assume the man didn't want to change seats. Must that have been an issue that resulted into that? That people say, what do you mean? The boy paid for his flight ticket. It shows you the fundamental problem we have in our culture. So let's integrate civic education that goes beyond patriotism to teach collaborative citizenship, critical thinking, and problem solving. Let's leverage our religious organizations to teach biblical and Quranic models of followership, especially where discipleship includes questioning, learning, and active service. Because that's what is missing in our leadership, in our followership education framework. We don't have the questioning in it. We don't have the learning in it. We don't have the active service in it. So that's why we abdicate the act of service to leadership. And it is in the active service that we now have a collaborative structure with the leadership, a collaborative relationship with the leader. The next thing is in workplaces. Let organizations with employees train their employees, not just in leadership pipelines. I'm a leadership consultant. Most of the things they engage me for is leadership development, leadership development. There is no way I will just, okay, why don't you let me train your people on followership development? They won't answer me. So what I do is I infuse it into the framework that I develop for them.
Yeah.
I infuse it into the framework that I develop for them. So rather than talk about leadership pipelines, let's talk about followership competence. Let's talk about feedback avoidance behavior at the workplace from a followership perspective. Let's equip people with taking ownership. Let's equip people with taking innovation and holding leaders accountable. The fourth layer is families. Let's encourage children to ask questions respectfully. Let's build a culture of questioning respectfully. To build cultures of questioning is very important. I started it about 5 years ago in my home. We sat our children down and we asked our children, what is it that mommy and daddy does that you don't like? We ask our children, we hold family meetings with our kids. What is it that your mom and dad does that you don't like? Tell us, give us a feedback. The feedback our children gave us was very unpalatable. My wife shook, but it helped us. It helped us to develop our own competence in accepting feedback, in taking feedback. So at the family level, let's encourage children to ask questions. Don't let us shut them down. Children ask all sorts of silly, stupid, but yet intelligent and profound questions. We shouldn't shut them down. They say, if you tell them, oh, this is the reason, they say, why? Why is it so? That means it compels you yourself to learn. And if you remember, the followership model that I was talking about involves what? Learning. Learning. I have learned a lot of things from my children. I have gotten fantastic feedback from my children, which was not palatable to my self-esteem or my ego. But you know what? It has helped my development as a leader. So let's encourage children in our family to ask questions. The family is the most important foundation for developing leadership. Not only leadership, more importantly, followership. So it's a side-by-side thing. So as parents, we cannot subjugate and reduce our children to just being seen and not being heard. We have to encourage them to ask questions respectfully. In our families, we need to build a culture of responsibility and shared decision making. And that's what I was saying to you at the beginning about my parents, that I learned the thing about taking responsibility and shared decision making through my family structure. That's one of the things my father model. Let me give you a practical example. In Rwanda, there's something called Umuganda. It is a monthly community service. They institutionalize it in such a way that it enhances active followership, where citizens take responsibility for national progress. You can research into it. The Rwanda's Umuganda. is a monthly community service that institutionalizes active followership where citizens take responsibility for national progress. So I want to throw a challenge to our listeners. And I say this, that if followership education were part of Nigeria's curriculum from primary school, how would our politics, our workplaces, our communities look different today? How? So if Africa does not need better leaders, it needs stronger followers. Leaders may set the direction, but followers create the movement. I repeat, leaders may set the direction, but followers create the movement. So I want to challenge every listener to stop asking, when will our leaders change? Instead, what role am I playing in shaping the future? And progress is not a solo act. It's a duet of leadership and followership. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Sobande, for the insightful session. Personally, I learned a lot, and I've taken notes. Particularly, there was something you mentioned when you were quoting the definition of the romance of leadership, where you shared underestimating the agency of followership. That to me meant that, followership has a lot of responsibility. They are seen as agents of change. They are seen as representative of the principal who sometimes can be the leader. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the insight, sir. And I hope to have you again. I hope to have you again for us to have a more robust conversation around the subject of followership and how it impacts leadership success. Have a good rest of the day.
I will, and you too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Future of Leadership podcast today. If you are here to kindly share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us across our social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all at TYIL. See you in the next episode.